Why lazy ambition terrifies society more than hard work. Carl Jung. We live in a world that worships hard work. Every billboard, every motivational speaker, every social media entrepreneur pounds the same message into our skulls. Hustle harder, wake up at 5 a.m., grind until you collapse, and then get up and grind again. And while there's undeniable value in work ethic, there's something deeper, something far more subversive that society never talks about. Something that Carl Jung understood at a level that still unsettles us today. It's the idea that what truly terrifies society isn't laziness. It's not even failure. It's lazy ambition. That strange, quiet, internal fire that burns without movement. That unshakable sense of destiny that doesn't always translate into action but refuses to die. That's what people fear, because it's unpredictable. It's uncontrollable. And it exposes the lie that hard work is the only path to greatness. Lazy ambition is the paradox of modern life. It often looks like apathy on the surface, but underneath, it's a deep psychological conflict. You feel something inside you, something enormous. A vision, a calling, a hunger that doesn't go away. But instead of moving, you freeze. You hesitate. You delay, and the world sees you as lazy. But Jung would argue, no, that's not laziness. That's the unconscious resisting a path that feels inauthentic. That's the soul refusing to participate in a game it never agreed to play. Jung called this the revolt of the self. It's not a failure of willpower, it's a spiritual rebellion against a life that doesn't fit. Ask yourself, have you ever wanted something so badly, but couldn't make yourself move toward it, not because you didn't care, but because something deeper inside you wasn't ready? That's lazy ambition. It's not the absence of drive, it's drive without direction, passion without a map. And society doesn't know what to do with that. Because it can't be monetized, it can't be measured. You can't put it on a performance review. It's too abstract, too internal, and most importantly, it's too dangerous. Dangerous? Yes, because lazy ambition challenges the entire structure of how the modern world defines success. Society loves action. It worships movement. It needs you to be visible, productive, reliable, because then it can track you. It can manage you. It can use you. But lazy ambition doesn't show up in predictable ways. The person who sits in silence for years, reading, thinking, dreaming, resisting all external pressure might one day create something that changes the world. Or they might vanish. That unpredictability terrifies the system. Because you can't build an economy around people who follow inner voices instead of external schedules.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Jung believed that lazy ambition is often a symptom of the psyche undergoing a transformation. He said that when the unconscious begins to stir, it often results in what looks like paralysis. But the ego wants to move forward, to act, to achieve, but the deeper self says, wait. Listen, there's something you haven't seen yet, and until you see it, you can't move. Or worse, you might move in the wrong direction and betray your own soul. This is why so many of us feel stuck, not because we're weak, but because we're not willing to lie to ourselves anymore. We don't want to succeed in a life that isn't ours. But here's the tragedy: society punishes this. It labels that stillness as failure. It labels that internal war as laziness. And so, Many people force themselves to move in ways that are out of alignment. They get the degree, they take the job, they build the brand, and on the outside they look like winners. But inside, something's gone dark. The ambition is still there, but now it's twisted, muted, bent into the shape of someone else's expectations. But that's not success, that's spiritual exile. And yet, what if we stopped pathologizing lazy ambition and started listening to it? What if we treated it not as a problem to fix, but as a signal to decode? What if the stillness wasn't weakness but wisdom? Jung taught that the psyche has its own timing, or its own seasons, its own way of unfolding. And just because you're not building a company or running a marathon doesn't mean you're failing. Maybe you're incubating. Maybe you're in the chrysalis. Maybe you're becoming something that can only emerge when the time is right. But can you trust that? Can you trust your own inner rhythm in a world that demands constant acceleration? That's the real question, because lazy ambition is a test not of motivation, but of self-trust. It asks, do you believe that your value isn't defined by your output? Do you believe there's something inside you worth waiting for? Most people can't answer yes, so they force themselves forward and die a little inside every day. But you're still here. You're still watching. You feel that tension between what you could do and what you should do. And maybe you've judged yourself for it. But what if I told you that you're not broken? You're not lazy. You're just not willing to waste your ambition on something meaningless. And that refusal, that quiet rebellion, is the first step towards something real. The inner saboteur, why resistance is a message, not a malfunction. We've been trained to treat resistance like a flaw, like a glitch in the system. When we don't feel motivated, when we procrastinate, stall, or freeze, we assume we're malfunctioning, that something in our psychology is broken. But what if that resistance is not a bug, but a signal? What if, as Carl Jung suggested, resistance is the psyche's way of saying, this path isn't yours? What if every time you've labeled yourself lazy, unproductive, or undisciplined, it was actually your deeper self trying to protect you from a version of success that would have destroyed you? This is the shadow side of ambition, the part we don't talk about. Everyone loves the story of the obsessed visionary who worked 20 hours a day, who sacrificed everything to build their empire. But no one asks what drove that obsession. Was it purpose or fear? Was it alignment or the desperate need to prove something? And even more importantly, what did they have to deny within themselves to keep that machine running? Jung's work on the shadow teaches us that what we suppress eventually controls us. And in our culture, we suppress rest, stillness, and introspection. We suppress the soul's voice and call it weakness. So when we feel resistance, we panic. Especially if we're ambitious. We think we've lost our edge. But Jung would say, no, you're not losing your edge, you're being redirected inward. The ego wants achievement. The soul wants meaning. And when those two are in conflict, the soul always finds a way to slow you down. That's the inner saboteur. It's not the enemy. It's the forgotten guardian inside you. The one you buried under deadlines, expectations, and performance metrics. The one that remembers who you really are before the world told you who to be. Think about it. How many times have you pushed yourself into a role, a routine, or a relationship that looked perfect on paper but felt like a slow death inside? And how did your body respond? Anxiety, exhaustion, disinterest. That's not you being a failure. That's your biology and your psyche staging a quiet revolt. That's your nervous system saying, this isn't it. And the more you ignore it, the louder it gets, until one day you burn out, or break down, or finally walk away, not because you're weak, but because you're done lying to yourself. Jung believed that the psyche is purposeful, that every symptom has meaning, that even our darkest impulses contain wisdom. So when your ambition turns lazy, when you feel stuck or off track, don't rush to fix it. Pause. Ask, what part of me is being silenced right now? What am I forcing? What am I afraid to admit? These aren't productivity questions. They're existential ones. They require courage, because the answers might unravel your life as you know it. They might force you to confront the terrifying possibility that everything you've been chasing isn't actually yours. But if you don't ask, you'll never know. You'll just keep pushing, performing, repeating the same cycles of burnout and self-judgment. And the tragedy is, you might get everything you wanted and feel nothing at all, because you built your life on someone else's definition of success. This is why lazy ambition is so dangerous to society. Because if you listen to it, really listen, it will wake you up. It will break the trance. It will pull you out of the machine and make you ask questions that threaten the entire structure. What if this isn't the life I want? What if success doesn't matter to me the way it used to? What if the thing I'm resisting is the very thing I'm supposed to walk away from? These questions aren't just personal. They're revolutionary. Because the moment you stop running and start listening to the resistance, you become something society can't predict. You become sovereign, unmanageable. A person who no longer responds to guilt, shame, or pressure. A person who has learned to trust the intelligence of their own psyche, even when it leads them away from the crowd. That's why the inner saboteur is feared. Because once you understand its message, you can no longer be manipulated. You can no longer be sold a dream that doesn't fit. You become immune to hustle propaganda. That you begin to live on your own terms. And that's the most terrifying thing of all to the system, to your peers, maybe even to yourself. Because freedom is scary. It demands responsibility. It demands solitude. It demands that you sit quietly with your own soul and ask, what do I truly want? And if the answer comes slowly, if it comes in silence, if it comes in resistance, listen. That's not a malfunction. That's the map. The myth of busyness, how society uses work to distract you from becoming who you really are. We live in an age where busyness is worn like a badge of honor. Ask someone how they're doing, and the most common response is busy. Not joyful, not grounded, not fulfilled, just busy. As if the sheer weight of activity is proof of value. As if the more we do, the more we matter. But Carl Jung would see this differently. He would say that much of what we call work isn't about purpose, it's about avoidance. It's distraction disguised as duty. We fill our calendars not because we're clear about what we want, but because we're terrified of what might surface if we ever stop moving. Busyness, in this sense, is not productivity, it's anesthesia. It numbs us. It shields us from the deeper, often uncomfortable work of self-confrontation. It allows us to avoid the existential questions lurking beneath the surface. Am I living the life I actually want? Do I even know who I am without all the momentum? What's left of me when there's nothing left to chase? These are not easy questions. They demand inner stillness. But stillness is threatening to a society built on speed. So instead, we're conditioned to equate identity with output. We are what we produce. We are what we build. We are what we achieve. But Jung's work dismantles that myth. He reminds us that the journey of becoming isn't found in endless motion, it's found in introspection, in symbols, in dreams, in the quiet, often irrational voice of the unconscious. And that voice doesn't speak the language of to-do lists. It doesn't care about your KPIs or your quarterly goals. It cares about wholeness. It wants integration. And if you ignore it long enough, it will begin to sabotage your carefully curated life, not to destroy you, but to wake you up. Ask yourself, what part of me have I neglected in the name of being productive? What have I postponed until I have time that actually holds the key to my soul? Most of us are so busy surviving that we forget to live. We confuse motion with meaning. We set goals that aren't really ours because they help us feel safe, accepted, admired, but not alive. And the tragedy is, we don't even see the trap. We just keep moving. And the faster we move, the less we feel. The less we feel, the more we work. It's a beautiful, terrible loop. But why does society push this so hard? Because a busy person is a manageable person. A busy person doesn't ask dangerous questions. A busy person doesn't rebel. A busy person doesn't pause long enough to realize they're being used. Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to function in the world. It's necessary, yes, but if we confuse the mask with the self, we become hollow. We become actors in a play we didn't write, performing roles we didn't choose, for an audience we don't even like. Lazy ambition, then, becomes a glitch in the matrix. It's a refusal to perform for the sake of performance. It's a rebellion against the myth that constant motion equals meaning. And that's terrifying, not just to others, but to ourselves. Because if we're not busy, who are we? If we're not building something, do we still matter? These are the questions that busyness helps us avoid. But sooner or later, the avoidance collapses. The mask cracks. The exhaustion becomes unbearable. And we're forced to face the unspoken truth. We've spent years climbing a mountain, only to realize it was the wrong one. But here's the good news. You can step off the treadmill. You can choose to slow down, not out of laziness, but out of reverence for your own soul. You can reclaim your time, your energy, your attention. You can dare to ask, what would my life look like if I only pursued what was truly mine to pursue? That's not easy. It might mean letting go of things that once defined you. It might mean disappointing people. It might mean sitting in the terrifying stillness of not knowing what's next. But that's where life begins, not in the busyness, but in the space beyond it. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who your parents wanted you to be, not who society rewards. Who you are, and that journey doesn't start with a packed schedule. It starts with a pause, a deep breath, a decision to stop running long enough to feel what's real. That's where the real work begins. Not the kind that earns applause, but the kind that sets you free. The fire that waits, how embracing your lazy ambition unlocks the life you were meant to live. There's a fire inside you. You felt it for years, quiet, glowing, occasionally flaring up when you're alone or when something stirs your soul. It's not the fire of hustle. It's not the fire of status or applause. It's something older, wilder, more sacred. It's the kind of fire that doesn't scream, it waits. It watches. It refuses to be rushed. This is the essence of what we've been calling lazy ambition. And it's not lazy at all. It's patient. It's powerful. And it terrifies society because it cannot be manipulated. It cannot be shamed into conformity. It does not move until the moment is right. Carl Jung knew that our deepest calling doesn't arrive with clarity. It arrives in fragments, in symbols, in tension. It doesn't show up as a 5-year plan. It begins as a restlessness, a discontent with the ordinary, a knowing that something inside you was built for more, even if you can't yet name it. And that's where most people give up. Because it's easier to silence that tension with productivity, with busyness, with someone else's dream. But when you stay with it, when you don't run from the discomfort, something extraordinary begins to happen. The fire grows. The vision clarifies. You begin to see that your ambition was never the problem. It was just waiting for the right container. This is where your life begins to shift from performance to purpose. You stop chasing every shiny opportunity. You stop saying yes to things that dilute your spirit. You stop needing to prove your worth through effort because you finally understand the fire inside you was never meant to be outsourced to someone else's dream. It was meant to build your own world, one aligned with your values, your curiosity, your strange and beautiful vision of what life could be. And that world doesn't require you to be the loudest or the fastest. It requires you to be true. But let's be honest, this path is not glamorous. It's slow, it's non-linear, it's filled with periods of doubt, false starts, quiet breakthroughs no one else notices. The world may call it failure. You may call it confusion. But Jung would call it individuation, the sacred process of becoming your full, integrated self. And that process cannot be rushed. It requires you to embrace the waiting, and to stay connected to the fire even when it has no name, even when it flickers, even when no one else sees it. Here's the secret. The people who change the world aren't always the hardest workers. They're the ones who waited for the right moment to act. They're the ones who knew that the most important work often happens in the dark, before the launch, before the recognition, in the quiet hours where you're not building a product, you're building yourself. That's the real ambition, not the ambition to be seen, but the ambition to become, not to impress, but to embody. And lazy ambition, when understood, is the soul's refusal to move before it's ready. So if you're in that place right now, stuck, restless, uncertain, don't judge it. Don't rush it. Don't call yourself lazy when what you actually are is becoming. The fire is still there. It's waiting for you to trust it. And when you do, when you finally stop forcing movement for the sake of motion, you'll begin to see the path that was meant for you all along. Not the path society handed you. Not the one that earns the most praise. The one that only you can walk. Ask yourself, one last time, what am I afraid will happen if I stop performing and start listening? What brilliance might emerge if I trust the fire to lead me instead of trying to control it? These are not small questions. These are the questions that change lives. And if you've made it this far, you're not just thinking anymore. You're remembering. You're remembering the part of you that never needed to hustle to be worthy. The part that knew all along that the fire would tell you when it's time. And when it does, you won't be lazy. You'll be ready.